Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 9th of March 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Behind the technical desk, Nick Green, and we're delighted to have a mystery guest watching proceedings. Well, pretty gloomy across UK, Plymouth, Cornwall, heavy rain. We've got heavy rain, gloomy conditions in Wales. Some sunshine in the southeast, and I still haven't got a report from Scotland. We'll catch up on that, of course, on Friday when we should be able to get a little bit more of northern exposure by David Scott. Well, first of all, let's look at the competence of Britain's police force and forces, and let's say what better place to start than Plymouth and an article from the Plymouth Herald. And this was a terrible story where Devon and Cornwall police, a Devon and Cornwall policeman drew his taser and fired it at a gentleman who had doused himself in petrol. As a result, the man caught fire and later died in hospital. Well, let's have a look at what's happened following investigation by the authorities. Well, the Crown Prosecution Service said, well, the man doused himself in petrol before appearing to strike a match. In response, one of the officers deployed his taser and Mr. Pimlock caught fire. So Crown Prosecution Service seemed a little bit surprised that if you fire a whole high voltage dart into somebody who's doused in fuel, they might well catch fire. But not to worry, because there was insufficient evidence for gross negligence or manslaughter or misconduct in public office. No worries there. And then what's happened is the good old IPCC has also done an inquiry, but it's basically said, well, after a 3-day hearing, there's no case against the policeman concerned. So rest assured, if you're faced with one of Britain's police officers armed with CS gas, pepper spray, taser, or increasingly an automatic weapon, be very, very careful, because what we're now seeing is the British state giving police officers the license to kill. And more coming from a variety of directions, Mike.
Indeed. I think. Well, a bit of a celebration because this is Commonwealth Day. Yay. And David Cameron had this to say: Commonwealth Day is an opportunity for all 53 countries of this unique network. It's now a network, you notice, common purpose.
Like, I would think so.
Yes. Unique opportunity for this unique network to not only celebrate our rich shared history, but look ahead to the future successes we will enjoy together. So that rich shared history, that would be based on what? Colonization, asset stripping, murder,
HSBC.
Rape, all this kind of stuff, drug dealing, this kind of stuff, right? So that's the rich history of the Commonwealth. I came into office with a strong belief in the principles that underpin our alliance, and I'm proud that the UK has revitalised its relationship with our Commonwealth partners over the last few years. So that was David Cameron. And then the Queen, well, she had this to say: one simple lesson from history is that when people come together to talk, to exchange ideas and to develop a common goals, wonderful things can happen. But as we're often reminded, the opposite can also be true. When common goals fall apart, so does the exchange of ideas. And she went on to say that in the Commonwealth, we are a group of 53 nations of dramatically different sizes and climates, but over the years, drawing on our shared history again, we have seen and acted upon the huge advantages of mutual cooperation and understanding for the benefit of our countries and the people who live in them. I don't think so. So I'd just like to draw your attention to this article. Multiple paths lead to one world government. And we were highlighting in this article, this is Martin Edwards and myself, we're highlighting that in July 2010, when the Queen addressed the UN General Assembly, she said, this September, leaders will meet to agree how to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, when each nation will have its own distinctive contribution to make. Since I addressed you last, the Commonwealth too has grown vigorously to become a group of nations representing nearly 2 billion people. It gives its wholehearted support to the significant contributions to the peace and stability of the world made by the United Nations and its agencies. Last November, when I opened the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Trinidad and Tobago, I told the delegates that the Commonwealth had the opportunity to lead. Today I offer you the same message. And the point we're making in this article is just how staggering the implications of that are, because the British monarch is telling the United Nations that she's creating basically the largest power bloc within the United Nations, 53 votes, 53 nations, 53 votes. Compare that to the single vote of the USA, Russia or China. And of course, we also mention in this, go on to point out the connections between the monarch, her family, Common Purpose, the United Nations, Agenda 21, and so on. So do have a read of that article if you haven't seen it already.
And the other thing perhaps we could remind viewers and listeners about is that some time ago we did find some interesting documentation around the Scottish Parliament, which was basically suggesting what was the best route to world government. Was it through the European Union type organisation, or in fact could the Commonwealth be used to achieve that aim? That was some time ago, so anybody who's interested in doing a little bit of research, start to have a look around the Scottish Parliament system documents. And of course, isn't that fascinating that at the moment we've had Alex Salmond attacking the Union as if the drive on his side is for Scotland to be an independent nation state, and yet we've also got in the background promotion of the Commonwealth for single world government. Well, maybe Scotland's students are beginning to wake up. This was sent to us this morning. Now, the site is the Campaign for Human Rights at Glasgow Uni. We've taken it at face value. Some very interesting articles here, warning about the dangers of the Scottish Nationalist Party, and in particular what Ms Sturgeon is up to at the moment. So here she is flashing what is clearly the start of the Scottish ID cards. But there's some pretty hard language being used in this website. It's talking about the rise of an SNP fascist Scotland, and it's also, of course, warning about the intention of the Scottish state to bring in an appointed person for every child from conception until the age of 18, where, quote, parents will also have a role to play. So good to see that younger people are starting to pick up on the serious state of politics, not only in UK as a whole, but north of the border. And that probably brings us into the non-election and the Rainbow Coalition, I would think.
Yeah, well, indeed, because they continue, rather than actually campaigning for, your vote, they continue to argue over these stupid television debates. So this is the Times actually from last Thursday. I just wanted to push this one up because we didn't do it last week. As parties unite, so the parties are united against Cameron. What does that tell you, Brian? We're heading for a Rainbow Coalition. Cameron may not be part of it, but the parties are united. That's great. But of course, on the back of this then, Ed Miliband showing his true colours, because he's decided that if he becomes the next Prime Minister, he's going to legislate to make it a legal requirement for everybody to take part in future television debates. So that's good. You don't get a choice in this country anymore.
I don't think so. Particularly if it's state BBC, of course, they'll have the whole thing sewn up. We'll be coming on to the BBC shortly, so don't go away.
Okay.
Well, if that's going on, we are increasingly learning that there's dissension in the ranks at the moment as Britain's senior officers start to express huge concern at the speed at which Britain's military capability is being destroyed. And many of those senior officers believe the next step is to remove Britain's independent nuclear deterrent. But a number of people picked up on this article from the Telegraph in this case, that the MOD is considering moving 6,000 tanks and military vehicles to Germany. And apparently this extraordinary move is being conducted because the MOD is selling off MOD estate, and therefore there won't be room to park these vehicles in UK. But some people are questioning the number of 6,000 tanks and military vehicles in the first place and saying this can't be right because Britain simply does not have this capacity. Certainly the maximum number of tanks that have been mentioned in defence statements is around about 272, possibly more with some in reserve. Many armoured vehicles, of course, left to rot in Iraq. So what is actually going on here? We've got David Cameron warning about a so-called threat from Russia At the same time, it's David Cameron's government that is completely destroying military capability. And the key bit we understand is that senior military chiefs now believe they've been totally sidelined, so that their advice and opinion on manning and equipment levels for the armed forces is simply being ignored by David Cameron's MPs and civil servants. So quite extraordinary things. Many people say this is the real reason for these strange events. So we have Mr. Juncker now calling for the creation of an EU army. And many people believe that as David Cameron is destroying our homegrown military capability, this is to force Britain further into the arms of the Franco-British Pact and ultimately control within an EU army itself. So dangerous times, Britain being stripped of its ability to defend itself.
But we're not stripping anybody else the ability to defend themselves, because tomorrow till I suppose Thursday is the security and policing event at Farnborough. Of course, this is not open to the public. Nobody gets to see. This is by invitation only. It's being run by the UK Trade and Investment, which is which is government's overseas trade agency. As I say, 81 countries represented in this, but we don't know which countries, because they basically want to keep it secret for security reasons. And what are they doing? Well, they're selling arms, of course, to all kinds of countries, really nasty countries. But according to, I think, one or two reports I saw today, UKTI refused to provide any information on the total number of countries invited. So that 81 is based on freedom of information requests, which I think the Independent ran last year. So that's transparent government for you, I suppose. But if we look at the 2014 guest list, Bahrain, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, Iraq, Libya, Pakistan, Saudi's mentioned twice there. So lots of nice countries buying lots of arms and armaments for the suppression of their own people, I suppose. But we don't.
For profit.
Yeah, for profit. But I'm sure that Britain is well represented at this event as well, because this is also happening possibly today, I think. It starts. This is Abu Dhabi's greatest arms bazaar, as Foreign Policy magazine pointing out. So this is the annual International Defence Exhibition, IDEX. It's apparently a market for a new high-resolution surveillance. They're asking, are you in the market for a high-resolution surveillance satellite or some high-caliber ammunition? Just pop along to that bazaar and you can buy it without any problem. So we might be cutting back on our military, but clearly arms sales going through the roof. And perhaps John Pilger has a bit of a clue about this, because he's asking why the rise of fascism is again the issue. And really interesting article. I suggest, it's a long article, but I suggest people read it. He's saying, to initiate a war of aggression, said the Nuremberg Tribunal, is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. And he goes on to really describe how we have been total hypocrites in Britain and America, starting these wars overseas, taking the moral high ground when in fact behaving quite the opposite. And he finishes off by pointing out the fascist influence within Ukraine itself, because he gets onto the Ukrainian subject, and he's pointing out, well, he's aside from the sort of geopolitical aspect or the sort of financial aspect of this war against the BRICS nations, he's also pointing out the fact that Joe Biden's son, for example, is on the board of Ukraine's biggest oil, gas and fracking company, and that perhaps there may be personal reasons why people are pushing against Russia and Ukraine. And he finishes off by saying, the responsibility for the rest of us is clear. It is to identify and expose the reckless lies of warmongers and never to collude with them. It is to reawaken the great popular movements that brought a fragile civilization to modern imperial states. Most important, it is to prevent the conquest of ourselves, our minds, our humanity, our self-respect. If we remain silent, victory over us is assured, and a Holocaust beckons.
Something very serious going on, and we're going to continue the theme shortly by having a look at really state control of the media.
Yeah.
But this was an interesting little snippet, and thank you very much for the viewer that alerted us to it. Restrictions over taking cash in and out of the UK. You must declare cash of 10,000. Oh, that's interesting. It's in euros. I thought I was living in UK, but you must declare cash of 10,000 euros or more, or the equivalent in another currency if you take it between the UK and any non-European Union country.
Why would you take euros to a non-European Union country?
Well, I don't know, possibly to buy arms, Mike. Maybe this is to try and cut back on the arms industry.
Possibly.
Well, there we are. We're discussing this live. What, of course, is gov.uk up to here? Is the general public aware of these limitations, and what's the reasoning behind it? Are we about to see some sort of banking crash?
Of course, from I think it's from the 1st of April, we're not going to be able to take ourselves out of the country if we owe any money, and that includes, for example,
TV
licensing. So, it's not just cash that's being restricted in terms of its travel.
And of course, the thing to remember about a fascist state or a Marxist state or a communitarian state is that that doesn't grow on the streets. It grows in warm offices behind closed doors by men in suits. So let's keep the focus where it should go, which is at the top of the pile. Which
is banking, of course. And, here we've got Barclays and Deutsche Bank in trouble again. We all know that they've been manipulating LIBOR, which is the London interbank lending rate. Now we've got Euribor. This is another Serious Fraud Office investigation. So the Serious Fraud Office continues to be pretty busy. We mentioned last week that they are now investigating the Bank of England itself for manipulating events around the financial crash of 2007, 2008, and this is more of the same. And we're going to continue to see these kinds of stories until such times as we actually deal with these corrupt bankers. So break the banks up is a simple solution, I would have thought. So this is an on-running criminal probe into whether Euribor was rigged, and they have charged 13 defendants as part of parallel inquiries on the LIBOR, but they've now asked people, certain traders, to come in and have a chat to them about Euribor as well. Now, it has to be said that Barclays and Deutsche Bank were not part of previous settlements on this issue and on the issue of broader corruption. So it remains to be seen what kind of fines they may receive on this basis and whether anybody actually is charged. But it does seem ironic, perhaps, that at the time that the banks are most in need of money, that they're having money taken away from them in fines, as opposed to people just being put in prison for breaking the law. It seems like that would be the more sensible solution: keep the money in the banks and put the people that committed the crimes in prison. Am I being...
Well, that would be sensible. Common sense not being applied here, so you fine people who create money out of nothing. It's a fairly good system.
And then, of course, as we already mentioned, you may not be able to take your money out of the country, but another bank, HSBC, joining the list of banks that are increasingly refusing to allow you to take your money out of your bank account. So 21st Century Wire here, pointing out that HSBC, well, this was, I think, end of January, was originally announced that HSBC was stopping customers withdrawing large amounts of cash unless they could actually prove what it was they were going to spend it on. Well, we know that smaller banks are doing that on smaller measures, but this is the first time, I think, that people with large bank accounts having the same problem. But also coming out in the last day or two is this allegation that HSBC has closed all 7 of its gold vaults. And the question which 21st Century Wire here asking was there anything in the gold vaults before they were closed? I would suggest not. The gold market, one of the most manipulated markets on the planet. There's a fraction of the physical metal available to cover the paper notes that are written on gold. And so I suspect we have seen big gold moves, cross-border gold moves over the last 12 months. We've covered it on a number of occasions, and this is another example of similar type of activity. It's fascinating what's going on around gold at the moment as people try to grab whatever physical asset they can actually get and make sure that those who are speculating in paper gold really are going to be left with the paper.
And we should, of course, remember Gordon Brown and his stroke of the pen decision to sell off vast amounts of UK gold. Well, if we're to get all this exposed, we need a free and trustworthy media. What better than the BBC? And the Mail online here pointing out that there's been anger after the BBC scrapped an interview that called for its chief, Rona Fairhead, to quit over her £513,000 a year second job with, oh dear, scandal head HSBC. So here we got the BBC state media intimately linked with one of the banks caught up in the corruption and fraud. She earns a mere £110,000 with the BBC. You can't live on that. UK Column is going to say that categorically. You just can't have a decent life on £110,000 a year. She needed an additional £500,000 a year. What better place to get it from than HSBC Bank? But of course, you can trust the BBC. A little while ago, they also employed Marcus Agius here, chairman of Barclays. They were paying him a mere £47,000 for just 28 days' work each year. We'd like to congratulate and thank all of the people who are helping the BBC carry on this racket by, of course, paying TV licenses and trusting the BBC. What's really at work, of course, is treason. The country is being broken apart deliberately by a cabal across all three parties, the Lib Lab Con, and shortly we're to see SNP and other parties join that cabal in what the UK Column is now labelling the Rainbow Coalition. So, can we trust the BBC? Well, The Guardian here, I have to say, has produced an excellent article where they are exposing the fact that the BBC is forcing out or demoting the journalists who tried to expose Jimmy Savile as a voracious abuser of girls. As Marion Jones put it to the reporter in The Guardian, there's a small group of powerful people at the BBC who think it would have been better if the truth about Savile had never come out, and they aim to, quote, punish the reporters who revealed it. So if we have a look at that in one of our famous diagrams, here is that article, The Scandal, BBC forcing people out. It went on to say the BBC press office bridled when The Guardian reporter described Jones and McCain as whistleblowers because the Pollard interview, conducted by the BBC to its own satisfaction into Savile, the Pollard review had concluded that BBC management had acted in good faith and therefore it was not to talk about whistleblowers. So let's remember what the BBC did to the editor of Panorama, Tom Giles, a man who tried to do the right thing. He was pushed out of his job. And enter Sherry Thomas. So he moved across into BBC News and then he was recused from the BBC Pollard report. That means he was given a job off to one side to make sure it didn't get too close. And then, surprise, surprise, he is promoted into the job of Panorama, which we've just learned is going to investigate the very activists and alternative media people who are reporting the child abuse in the first place. We don't have to make this up. This is all factually correct. We'll invite people to check it. Meanwhile, Britain's police have geared up because they've decided that they can raid the homes of dead people 6 weeks after the event, confident that none of the material evidence or incriminating evidence will have been removed and disposed of. But here we've got the police now raiding the home of Lord Leon Brittan and other VIPs, Lord Bramall, in fact. There he is, decorated with numerous medals. And of course he says, well, nothing's wrong. Well done, Britain's police. And here's the man, of course, as we should remember him, Leon Brittan, standing up to prevent crime. And of course, one of the ways of preventing crime is to destroy evidence when it's handed to you. No doubt BBC Panorama will be investigating the abuse around Leon Brittan and the cover-up at Elm House, or maybe they won't. Well, I never thought I'd say it. Congratulations to The Guardian twice, because another excellent article where they are pointing out that Paul Gambaccini has really been I think the expression is ramming it home to Keith Vaz by saying that basically the CPS were running a campaign against him in order to help close down proper investigation into political and establishment paedophiles. And I will say, while the jury may still be out on some celebrities, I think there's a lot of truth in this because we are simply not getting full and proper investigations from the police. Well, perhaps we should be saying the BBC will out the paedophiles in the United Kingdom. We'd like to remind people about the UK column's interaction with this lady, reporter for Radio 4, Nicholas Stambridge, and she was going to investigate the abuse of youngsters at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. She agreed to meet up with the column and victims in order to hear from those young people themselves the abuse that they'd suffered. And then, surprise, surprise, she pulled out at the last moment. Now, before we hear the telephone conversation so that viewers and listeners can take in the information for themselves, let's just remind ourselves of what Radio 4 is about. If we can just pop this one on screen, Nick, briefly. Here we are. It says Radio 4 is a station for anyone interested in intelligent speech. Its schedule is packed with the most insightful journalism, the wittiest comedy, the most fascinating features, and the most compelling drama and readings anywhere in UK radio. So let's have a look and see what this lady had to say in a conversation with the UK column on the subject of appalling sexual and physical abuse of youngsters at an Oxford school. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Is that Nicholas Stambridge?
It is.
Yeah, hi. It's Brian Gerrish from the UK column.
Oh, hi there, Brian.
We spoke, a week and a bit ago.
Yes.
I was basically taking a bit of time off with the family last week, and I've been back this week, which has now flown by. But I thought I would give you a call to say, are you still interested in a meet-up and look at some material?
At the moment, the answer is no, because I've been landed with a number of projects to get done now before Christmas. So should we put it on hold for the time being? And if I come back to it, I'll give you a call.
Well, you can do, but at the end of the day, Nicola, we're dealing with the abuse of children, which, as we're seeing in the mainstream press, we've got extraordinary things happening.
I know.
And this is not something that, I do not know what is the matter with our mainstream press at the moment, but, what is more important than the safety of young children and young people?
Well, if it's obviously it's not to be complacent about, but I'm putting together a piece about anorexia among children at the moment. So I'm not exactly off looking into some serious subjects amid other lighter-hearted subjects. So they're all there and they're all bubbling away. But
okay, I'm going to say that you came to me. It's a serious subject. We've been battling now for months to break this thing, but obviously it's not very high on your priorities. That's what you're telling me.
Well, it might not be my priorities we're talking about, but I just have to crack on with this list of projects that I've got to.
Well, you take on your editor, but I really despair at what is going on in this country. We've got these horrific stories coming out about what's been going on in the children. We've got idiots like Little John today trying to make out the whole thing is conspiracy theory. If you knew what, which I'm sure you don't, what they really do to these children, I think you'd want to do something about it. But okay,
Radio 4
editors are not interested. That's what you're telling me.
Not at the moment, because we've explored with the council and the police. We've made calls, and at the moment.
So what you're telling me is that you've spoken to all the people guilty of the cover-up, and they're telling you that there's nothing in this story, so you've dropped it.
Well, we haven't dropped it. I mean, we never started it.
Well, give me an idea of what the council have said.
Well, if it's all right, I'd rather not, Brian.
Well, I'll tell you what they said. They said there's nothing in the story. So you have not sat down with me to look, because I was going to sit you down to let you look at statements written by some of these young people. And I guarantee you would be stunned and horrified. And all you've done is spoken to the very people who are refusing to properly investigate and deal with this abuse.
Right. We've spoken to a number of people around the case.
Have you spoken to any of the victims?
Well, we've spoken to you, and I mean, if you have
I'm not
to do
a victim. Have you spoken to any of the victims?
By all means, if you think that they should get in contact with us, please.
No, I'm not playing that game, because you are telling me you are not taking the matter seriously. You've spoken to the very people who are covering up what has been done to these children.
Well, we're not prepared to go through you in terms of talking to these children.
What do you mean by that? I have offered to let you read statements.
But we would like to speak to them independently and on their own.
That is possible.
They are absolutely. You have my details. You can, by all means, pass on my details.
No, I said to you.
That's how it has to be.
I said to you, I was prepared to see whether that could happen.
If they want to raise these allegations with the Today programme on Radio 4, you get them to call me. If there are several witnesses and they corroborate what's going on, then we'll take it forward. But that's all I can offer.
You think that I'm going to get witnesses? Some of these people are very frightened to make a phone call to you when you are telling me that your investigative journalism is so casual. The only people you've spoken to are the very authorities that are covering this up.
Well, we've spoken to other people involved as well.
Have you spoken to any victims?
I'm letting you have my details, and if there are any victims that you want to ask to call, that's fair enough, Brian.
Nicola, please answer the question. Have you spoken to any victims?
Yeah, well, we're not going to go through you to speak to the victims. If they want to speak to us, that's absolutely acceptable.
But how can you not go through me if I am the person in contact with victims and you're not?
You should be controlling victims, Brian, and I think if there are victims, you should let them call me directly, and I will hear what they have to say.
Are you suggesting that I am controlling people who've been abused?
Well, you are if you're not letting them call me independently.
They won't call you because they're not going to call people they don't trust, and what I said to you is trust has to be built up.
You shouldn't suggest to people that there's no reason to trust a journalist out of the blue, because
you've told me so far that the only people you're prepared to speak to are the very authorities who are covering up the abuse in the first place.
No, we've spoken to people around the subject.
Have you spoken to any victims?
You have my number. Please pass it on to the victims and say to them that I am unbiased and I will listen to what they have to say.
So
I will not go through you to speak to victims of abuse, Brian. I'm sorry.
You are part of the Today, Radio 4 Today programme, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Nicola. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. You can hear very clearly that experienced reporter from Channel 4 and the Today set up from the BBC ultimately is talking about being put under pressure not to carry on the investigation into child abuse. So let's just have a look at the sort of adverts that Today and Radio 4 were doing on the BBC website. Here it is. And of course, Nicola Stambridge is there on the front page. But let's remind ourselves of who was controlling Radio 4 Today editor. Now, this is one of the people, and we're back on Sherry Thomas, of course. And this is the Guardian article saying, well, he was recused. He was allowed to stand down, to move away from the BBC's internal investigation on the cover-up of Jimmy Savile paedophile abuse. And here's the man here, becoming ever more important, making the Media Guardian 100 debut as a very important person. But oh dear, he's got some rather strange ideas on women. And it took the Mirror to report fury at Radio 4 bosses Sherry Thomas's views on women. He basically feels that women are not up to the job of being frontline reporters. And wonder whether he thought that about Nicola Stambridge. And this is the man who doesn't really rate women, but of course he's happy for women to help pay for his salary. We'll leave you with the thought that it's taken Iranian TV, Press TV, to actually produce a decent short documentary on paedophiles in the British establishment. This is available on YouTube, very well put together. And of course, it's completely leaving the BBC in the dirt as our British Propaganda Corporation simply refuses to expose paedophilia in and around Westminster and the establishment. So there we are, dictatorship coming into Britain by stealth. Can we stop it? Of course. We simply need millions of people to say we're not having it and to start telling the truth. What's coming, unless we withdraw our consent, is the Rainbow Coalition, which is going to be all three main parties, we predict, plus SNP, plus the Green Party, plus UKIP, locked together in a single party state. There we are. Any good news, Mike?
No.
No good news today. We'll try and have some good news for our viewers and listeners tomorrow. There is good news out there. And we're also going to be talking about the North London child abuse case tomorrow. We've had several people ask, where is Melanie Shaw? Well, of course, abuse victim and whistleblower Melanie Shaw is locked up in private profit-making prison Sodexo in Peterborough. We have had no communication from Melanie at all. And Sodexo is saying that it is not allowing lay legal advisors into the prison. I'll also just say that, of course, Anne Gregg, mother of Holly Gregg, is now completely gagged from speaking out about the abuse of her daughter, and Robert Green gagged for life by the Scottish Court in Aberdeen for speaking out on child abuse. Is it any wonder we're seeing what's happening around Parliament at the moment? A raid on your house 6 weeks after you've departed the planet. Useful stuff.
Yes. So immediately after this programme, we're playing out Justin Walker's talk from the BCG conference. And then tonight we've got, I believe, a full quota of Ian Crane with Crane Report at 7:30, Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock. And we'll have the UK column news in between those two. And we will also play Justin's talk from the conference immediately after Fracking Nightmare. So a packed evening tonight as well.
And thank you very much all the people who've contacted us to say how much they enjoyed the conference. And indeed many people are still telling us how shocked they were to hear the presented analysis of Britain's cover-up of paedophiles in and around Westminster. And of course the very harrowing testimony from Kaz and indeed other people talking about the reality of state-sponsored child abuse in Britain in 2015. So the videos over the grand juries, of course, still to come up. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure what happened there, but it is live.
Yeah,
we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.